Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for coming and thank you for participating not only in this practice, but in this study, in this Dharma talk. Thank you also for all of your support in so many other ways, in particular financial help. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. And thank you. Hard to know what else to say other than gratitude, gratitude. And please continue to help us if you can. We need to keep moving along, as do you in your life. You're doing pretty well, and you can share some of your abundance, shall we say it that way? Please help us keep coming. I'll keep coming. Community will keep coming, and we will form a community. This community's been forming for many, many years. Not too much about size, a little bit, but it's quite a bit about the intention to see what this is, see what the truth is yourself. This path is not about something you believe in. It's something you look at to see what it is yourself. You get to do this. This is what this person's here for, is to help you, encourage you to see it yourself, not to believe a bunch of concepts and ideas, though we may need some concepts and ideas in order to proceed along. Of course, we need that. Just like we need very ordinary accumulative memory, analytical, logical, structural kind of learning, which I'm titling today's talk, ego learning. Ego, the way ego gets a credential in order to proceed being a strong person who is in control, who's in charge, who knows everything, who's smarter than most people, and on and on. And I would also say, right on top of that, following that up, it's not that you're not relatively maybe doing a lot better. Some people have incredible memories. They're just able to take a piece of material. And is that a sign of intelligence? Well, it's part of it, of course, but it doesn't take the place of it. It doesn't take the place of some kind of raw, firsthand intention or insight into just looking at what something is before the accumulation of concepts, ideas that you've learned over the last 20, 30, 40 years come together to help you move that around and find out what is the relative value, or is this, how is this working in this way or this way? How can I use this? How can this benefit me? How will this look if I start talking about this, or if I study this particular thing? Will that make me look more? Quite often it's about the information, the education, the learning that will support an imaginary self, which is unreal. And sometimes the imaginary self is not so obvious. Some people you look at, you would never refer to them as egotistical, even though their whole system is all about, I'll say it reverse, me. It's just that they're very, very sophisticated at it, so they don't appear too self-centered. But that's what's happening. Other people don't give a damn how self-centered they look. They just want to control everything. And they don't hesitate to push you around, intimidate you, push you over, attack you, maybe even physically, but for sure, conceptually, psychologically, mentally. And sometimes people are so amazingly good at this that it's convincing. We actually believe that the other person thinks they're right about what a terrible mess we've made of our lives. When actually you're just living your life as it is served to you. Don't bother correcting anyone, please. Be responsible for your own mind stream. You probably heard me say something about, I don't think it's a good idea to test people, education, that kind of learning. It's not that we shouldn't do some of that. Someone was saying it, maybe it was Unia was saying she didn't really want anyone doing brain surgery on her, that it had some testing first to make sure that they weren't just. Whoever laughed, are you a surgeon? We're about to turn your microphone off. So you want to get one last laugh in, you better. So what am I saying? I'm just saying that we could look more closely. This is what I'm encouraging. Look more closely at the way in which we understand or we learn. This is why we do it this way at this monastery. This is not something I was taught. It's something I've been looking at for a long, long time. I'm not going to brag again about how old I am. I'm just saying I've looked at it for a long time. It did not happen like, as they say, overnight. It took a long time to see that my exposure to education when I was very young, I actually had some insight into it then, but didn't trust it, didn't know who I was. I just concluded, as everyone does, that, well, if you can't pass the test, you must not be very smart, or you don't have a good memory, or you're dumb, as my stepfather would like to say in this direction, which maybe you've had fathers or parents who did that too. Or maybe you've had parents that go the other way, that approve of everything you do, no matter what, because you're so wonderful, because you're their child. Is that sarcastic? You bet it is. But I'm not trying to encourage you to gamble. So let's look at it together. Let's look at the way we learn, the way we educate ourselves. Let's look at the way we learn anything. And this is why I've said, just from being unclear about it, about what I've been reading, I go back and I read it over and over. Not so much these days, but years ago, I would read something over and over and over. And it would just make me feel more and more confused about what I was reading, because I saw that I couldn't really penetrate down into that material very easily. So I found it was much more helpful to actually study it with someone else who maybe they were having a similar issue, but we could discuss it. Or maybe they seemed to have more insight into it, and then I could maybe get some help from that person. I call that Sangha. This is why we study together and why we study in the way that we do. There's no testing. We're not trying to find out who's the smartest. We already know, don't we? Okay, Chisho. Is he here? There he is. Yes. He's right at the top of the screen in the center. Thank you, sir. Thank you for letting me poke at you a little bit. So, and this doesn't, I'm not kidding. I mean, Chisho is somebody who has a lot of insight, a lot of intelligence, and works very hard at that, but also is willing to give the benefit of the doubt to this old teacher who is not very smart. And I'm not saying this is some kind of false humility. False humility. It's not as wet as you thought it was. So I'm just saying we need to do this together. Let's work together. We don't want to run just because someone's intelligence or the way of presenting an idea seems different than the way we've been hearing it. We might want to consider that for a while. Listen, take a good deep whiff of whatever that is that's coming our way, and get an idea for lack of a better word, in an intuitive way about what is being said, rather than just it doesn't fit our intellectual paradigm. And this is, if I were to go back into the area where I have a difficulty with the whole educational idea, is that testing people is about controlling them. It's not about fundamentally being very, very respectful to the individual intelligence of each person. People need to be met where they're at, especially children, of course. Those are the ones we presume to educate. And the whole system is, it has good things about it, of course, but then there's also areas where the people who learn in different ways, and this is my own validation of where I'm coming from on this. I learn very slow. I do learn, but I learn extremely slowly. I have to really contemplate something a long time, and don't have a really powerful memory ability to just commit to memory, at least not in the last 20 years or so. So, Shirley Ann, good to see you there. I see your name. I don't see you. I haven't seen you in a few years. Good to see you. See your name. So I think it was Chazan was just commenting on homeless Kodo, and he had interesting. I didn't know it before, but can you quote anything, paraphrase anything he said about education, which is a similar kind of approach that I'm understanding, but it's the same.
It was similar in just that the absurdity of the standard that's kind of arbitrary to evaluate people, and then essentially just making products that you are a product of this school so you can get into that school so that you can get that job. It's just just an intense form of materialism that we all agree on.
Yes, thank you. So the way in which we study the Dharma here, and I highly encourage you to do it this way, is to study the material and don't worry so much about understanding. Actually study it and then start over and read it again and then read it again. We do the same thing with mantras. If with working with you, you're working with me and we're doing any kind of mantra work, we do it 3 different speeds. We do it very, very slow, and then just a medium speed, and then just as fast as you can. Something about this over time takes time. Over time brings that kind of conceptual approach to language, to sound, into the mind stream and the consciousness in different ways. One, it's so fast you can't comprehend it. Another one that it's about the speed where you can get ordinary comprehension, and the other very, very slow one does a different kind of thing to help you understand. It's more like a shikantaza. It's a very slow way that things tend to arise in the mind stream. So there might be 5 different speeds. I don't know, but that gives you an idea of a way that you can work with that so that you can, maybe the word might be absorb rather than just think about, receive and reflect and have a success story about how good you are at receiving something. Could be understanding or learning can take place in ways in which the self-centered part of the mind can't get a credential for it. Powerful. Sometimes this is referred to as wisdom or not. Sean, where are you going? Or is that just a movie screen behind you?
I'm going to West Virginia. I'm on the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Oh, good. Well, keep your eyes on the road. He's got the screen in front of him. So are there some questions? I could talk some more, but we could also really, especially from people who have a lot of education. Let's talk about this. I have very little formal education, but I have a lot of studying, shall we say. Yes, sir.
Is there a way to utilize the systems that are in place and relate to them more intelligently? Bowing.
I'm sure there are, and that may show up differently for each person. If you're going to be, obviously be an attorney, as we have 2 attorneys here in the room, at least maybe more, but I know at least 2. And so you're going to have to do some very definite structural understanding and memorization. There's no way to get around that part of it. But also you could look into it in deeper ways, just the sitting practice of meditation, along with any kind of education that you're doing. That way of strengthening, stretching, prioritizing awareness over, not too much over it is better than, but over than situationally. Sometimes the awareness is it seems to be more have more of a quality of something, although it's not a thing, because it's noticed just like the sky is noticed around the clouds. But if you look at the sky, you don't necessarily see the clouds. But if you look at the clouds, you're always going to see the sky. More.
Jeez, I'm bowing. Seems like most of us listening to you have probably gone through our highest level of formal education, unlikely to do too much more. And I'm wondering about, guiding young people. Is there a way? Kelly and I are working at the high school and the library, and then with Rumi, is there a way to guide these young people who really don't have an alternative to the educational system that's being presented? Bowing.
Yeah, so that's it's very important to be respectful to the young people, and to instead of just trying to get them to study material and take tests and a conventional kind of understanding that's all over the place. I'm not saying there aren't some different ways of education that are out there that I might not even know about, or that some of you might know about. But I would say go slowly and try to meet each person individually in their situation rather than set up a situation where everybody gets the same teaching. We have a lecture hall or something like that. Might take a lot more work, but talk to people, relate to people individually rather than look down to them as students who need to live up to certain standards. Setting up standards is just nuts. It's nuts because every time you meet somebody, you have a whole different structure of understanding. You are looking at literally countless lifetimes of being some kind of a being, not necessarily human. And I don't have to prove that to anyone. You don't have to consider it if you don't want to. Certainly don't have to believe it. But it's very, very important to, just like with your son, not to pick on Rumi particularly, but to meet him. You've been doing this since you met him. You've been relating to him right where he's at. Have you noticed what a powerful personality he is? Still powerful, even though he's going on 6, but he was really powerful when he was 2 or 3. He was going to run everything. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Well, tell me a little bit about it. What was it like? What was it like, really? I mean, seriously,
It was
you're a father.
interesting to see the impulse to fight with a 3-year-old and how absurd that was. So
Thank
he
you.
told me, get out of the room. I don't, I want to be with mom, go away.
Yes.
I did. I would just say, okay. I wouldn't fight him, but there was an impulse to try to explain to him why that hurt my feelings, as if he were able to understand, because what he was doing wasn't inappropriate, except for in a context of an adult wouldn't do that to another adult necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah, it's interesting how I was told when I was very, very young that I didn't have any feelings. And I remember thinking, kind of existential 6-year-old, thinking, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think that, but it was like what was going on is I hadn't thought about that before. I don't. And I began to, through the help of my stepfather, began to examine, see, do I actually have feelings? Is he correct about that? It was kind of an odd thing to be happening for me. But your way of relating to it is quite a bit different than some parents would have just thought, well, we can't have a child acting like that. They have to be disciplined immediately and possibly even struck or, any more about that? Yeah.
He's very considerate now, and he rarely functions out of a rule. And while he may not speak up, he doesn't really miss anything. So I think that has been helpful to not force too many standards without letting him run the place.
I like that. Sanho.
Sanho, and Shiazan just said context. I'm wondering specifically about relating to other adults, whether it's in the education system or just in daily life. What is it about context that, in my mind, might matter more than expectations or credentials?
You say a little bit more about that. Get me closer to what, do you have a question, first of all? Is there a question?
Often you'll hear people say, oh, you should break up with that person, or oh, you should quit that job, or what have you, because whatever their reasons are. But maybe the context makes things seem less black and white than that. And I just wonder, is there a teaching around context being important?
Yes, every situation should be met as it is and with as little standard as possible. If you notice a standard come up, don't push it away, but just realize that here you're looking at a situation that's very fluid, very even vibrating, even changing this colors and shapes and textures and sizes and all kinds of dynamics happening conceptually around that are rising up, looking for your attention or looking for your agreement or your disagreement. You all know what I'm talking about. And over here, you have a standard that keeps coming right up that you can compare with. And there's nothing wrong with seeing and comparing. When I say there's nothing wrong, I don't mean to say there's something wrong with concluding about after the comparison. You can get rid of that comparison just by agreeing with something or disagreeing with something. And this is why I say, and been saying for a while. Don't take any position, but don't ignore anything either. And that's much more difficult for that part of the consciousness we call a self or an ego or a me feeling that does not want to fail, that does not want to be wrong, that wants to get ahead, that wants to succeed. So context or the situation itself is changing all the time. And so I think it's very important. Is there some specific area you want to just look at?
Sun Ho bowing. I mean, I am hedging, but it's because the specifics are too specific. When does being context specific become being like a pacifist or a pushover or something like that?
Say that again. Only say it better.
God, no bowing. I'm feeling inarticulate. How do you avoid being a pacifist or a pushover or something like that if you're being context specific?
If you're actually including whatever's arising, then, and you have some mind training, where you spent some time practicing just receiving, not adding anything particular. But if you do add something, then just receiving that you are adding, being responsible, aware that part of your consciousness is trying to push back on something. Excuse me, it's the awareness of that, not the success story of no longer pushing on anything. We get caught up in that quite a bit. And that's the way the ego, the self-centered part of the mind, aspect of the mind, gets a credential for it. So it's about the awareness of seeing that, what is happening there, rather than some kind of success story conclusion that we're no longer concerned about being a pushover or not. We don't care if we're a pushover. We don't care because quite often being a pushover we might think that we don't want to be a pushover, but actually it might come closer to being, we don't want to be seen as a pushover by others. We don't want to come to a conclusion. So we try to control other people's conclusions, and we can control our own. Control is a big question with no clarity around it. Sir. I have one attorney after another. This is getting dangerous. Yes.
There seems to be like an aversion or a laziness when it comes to learning new materials or studying the Dharma, just because of, maybe I do that all the time with work and don't want to do it. Is there a place for testing and deadlines in the learning process?
I think we have these forms, and we have somewhat, you're very good at letting Sangha know or whomever what your schedule is and when you can do this, when you can't do that, as far as the forms in the monastery. So you seem to have that pretty much covered, probably as much, if not more than most people do, just because you're pretty good with details. Seems to be kind of a natural area for you. So I'm not sure where your question's coming from, because I don't see where you would be having too many issues in that area.
Shanjemba, I guess I'm wondering, is there a place like with the Dharma materials, like actually what book study or something like that, or maybe our own personal
What about it?
For deadlines, for testing?
Maybe a little bit, but the testing, actually, it's better if that, rather than get a testing thing, which reinforces the conceptual matrix of the ego and the mind. It's not that you can't do that, of course, we're going to have to do some of that, but let's make sure that we bring our awareness to that first and realize that from the point of view of the self-centered, the basic issue or problem of all the warfare and all the conflict and all the passion, aggression, ignorances in the world is mistaken identity, thinking that we're a separate being and those are separate beings, and that we can get along with some and have friends and have enemies and so on. That's just an incredible illusion that we buy into from the point of view of pushing back, joining, doing anything kind of positionality on it. And so this is why it's so important and powerful to just be aware without particularly knowing what you're aware of. this won't feel particularly comfortable or supportive to the part of the consciousness that we refer to as narcissism or the ego or the seventh consciousness. So we were slowly weaning ourselves away from that area that wants proof, wants to know. And we were always validating this in society. Well, we don't have proof for that. And so in your profession, you need proof. And so your ability to do that kind of work, I would think, would be enhanced by less attachment to reference points, because you would be able to see way beyond that sooner than other people who are extremely attached to what right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, success and failure, correct and incorrect. A willingness to actually live consciousnesses in that. It's like you're identified more with the sky than you are with the clouds that come and go. And yet you don't miss a single cloud that comes and goes. You might see its nature or the structure of that particular concept or idea even more clearly than someone who is using a lot of memory and analysis and logic and so on to manipulate things. That we come close to what you're asking about.
If there's an aversion to learning materials or a laziness about it, what is there to look at? Like, even when it comes to the Dharma, like, what is it there to look at?
But this is why it's important to, we set up a forum, and I would say we have how many book studies? I don't count them. Do you know how many altogether? If you could actually attend all of those. You had the time. There's at least 7 or 8, something like that, and all studying different parts of the Dharma. And you attend some of those, don't you? Yeah. You attend enough of them.
Yeah.
Really?
So,
Well, you see what I'm saying? So it's there, but we also want to be respectful of each person's time, their work situation, their financial situation, and even their energy situation. Some people don't get enough sleep, don't get as much as they should. When I say should, as much as their body might need. So we need to be very respectful of everybody, just to rather lay down a line where everybody has to toe the line, so to speak. And people do the best. You wouldn't be in this community if you weren't pretty sincere about this practice. So just that you're in it means that you're probably doing the best that you can. Though some people are maybe participating more or studying more. I'm not sure if I feel like I'm missing something you're asking about.
Shanji, but I mean, maybe it just boils down to this. It feels like the book studies, we could do a couple pages at a time or something like
You
that.
do. That's
And-
deliberate.
And I guess it doesn't feel like I'm consuming enough information in order to be satisfying. And so it feels like I'm not doing.
It's not about being satisfied, about getting satisfied. It's about studying. And this, the way we studied is very slow. This doesn't mean you can't take this same book. Dogen, go and read the whole thing. Read Dogen through twice. Read the A.A. Koroku. That's pretty much the bulk of his work, other than a few odds and ends here and there. Read it on your own if you really want to study and go fast, and then bring all of your incredible wisdom back to the book study and then discuss it with people who are going very slow.
I'll stop here. Shanti, but when, like, I guess it comes down to, I won't read it on my own.
You won't?
No. And I
I
guess
can-
I'm
I can be
wondering what's
arranged.
going on there.
I can handle it.
Okay,
I can tell you to do it.
please.
And then you'll have to tell me you can't do it.
Okay,
Want to do that?
sure.
Start today. So no, I'm still feeling like I'm not deliberately, but I think I'm missing part of your point there that I might be able to address, maybe more helpful.
I'll try one last, Shanji, I'm buying. If there is a reluctance to study on my own. And,
Just lazy. Like you said.
okay,
No, go ahead, please. Reluctance is.
but I guess what is there to look at when seeing that reluctance that feels like it's preventing me to?
So let's go back to that. I would say just study the way it's set up here. You don't have to study on your own. Well, I'm not really requiring that. I'm saying you can if you want, if you feel a lot like you're not moving it fast enough. Some people study way ahead. It's not a problem. They can do whatever they want. So when you come to the study group, then you might be in an area that maybe you've already looked at, you've gone by, you felt like you understand it. But yet, if you come back into that material and discuss it with people, sometimes you see that there's a deeper understanding that goes actually deeper or beyond the words that are being, especially with someone like Dogen. Not to mention all the other texts that we study over and over and over again. Look how many times we've been through the 30 verses. I have no idea how many. Do you know? I've been talking about it off and on for years. Powerful teaching. That's a translation out of the Sanskrit, several translations, and it's still, even though it's very definite conceptual structures that someone, Vasubandhu, not to mention others, have brought together out of their understanding, brought back out of the consciousness area into concepts in such a way that if you read that and study that material, it will help you using concepts to move back into consciousness only. If you are also training your mind to just see, just witness, just watch the coming and going without adding, subtracting, or dividing. It helps you actually go deeper into it, and the understanding you have won't be a conclusion. So therefore, ego gets no fuel from that, and the ego starts to starve, basically, to put it bluntly. And it's not comfortable. Yes, sir.
How do you know if you should study more?
If you shouldn't,
If you should.
should have a conversation like this with me.
Okay.
You. Hondo, I'll
Hondo,
get to you in a minute.
So much of when you instruct us on book studies, for example, you're saying the majority, is it true that, is it the majority of what we're learning there is, or what we're about is awareness of our own thinking, our own mind, our own
Yes.
emotions? Is there a way to like say, should that be like 5% of it, or is that should be more like 90% of it? I'm just working with the attorney here.
It's the other 5%. What? Is that what you said?
I think that added up to 95%. I wanted to know about the other 5.
Yeah, where that slipped through the cracks. Can you paraphrase what you just asked?
Wonder about how much of our book studying is about awareness of our own experience, our own whatever,
Yes.
whatever we're bringing to that book study, and how much of it is actually about the material itself.
I would say it varies. It goes back and forth. Sometimes it's just about self-consciousness of being in there and being with other people who are studying in such a way that you think is too much, or maybe studying in such a way that you're not really able to track what it is they're going back and forth between two people. That's always about awareness. Just if you can remember that, it's just about awareness of what's happening, not understanding what's happening. Because if it's always about understanding, then we're going back to testing and did you understand this right? And then the whole right and wrong situation. When this material, the spiritual path, transcends right and wrong. It transcends enlightenment and confusion. It takes every single polarity. Sanji.
Sanjay, the education system in this country is set up to specialize. You have lawyers.
What's your question? I
Well, the
understand.
question is that system set up to make the ego educated?
Well, somewhat, but they're not dealing. Their function is not a spiritual path. It's how do we teach somebody how to repair a tractor? How do we teach someone how to run a computer, how to program? All this is very necessary. I'm not against any of that. Let's do it, and let's test. Let's test on things like that when it comes to that. But then there are other areas that we need to back away from the testing and encourage the awareness, especially with very, very young people who are, it's very tempting for them to just start building an ego like the rest of society is doing, rather than actually be completely here and be vulnerable. Very hard to teach a child who's already vulnerable, not to start covering things up right away so that their friends will like them. So I mean, all the other, whatever pressures there are in society for people. Sano, I'll get to you in a minute.
How could we use our various degrees, certificates, licenses to save all beings?
So that's what we're working on here. That's why we're building this community mindfulness center, so that people who will probably never walk in here may walk into an environment where Somebody could just not preach Buddhism to them necessarily, but just talk about, you might want to take a look at your mind just as it is, rather than go in and go to drugs, go to activity that is not particularly healthy or helpful, and all kinds of other things that are happening in society that purport to fundamentally help people. Not that they can, but there's some people, probably a lot of people, who could benefit from just sitting down, watching the mind stream come and go. What's commonly referred to as mindfulness. Very simple. I'm very much in favor of teaching people in any way that they show up, including those who want to be monks, but that's your business. I'm not here to promote anything particularly. More? Sano?
So about, some of us have jobs where we're not supposed to tell people to sit with it. We're supposed to tell people rah, rah, rah. Or make them feel better in some way. I wonder. No, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, you might have to do that too, and keep it situational. It's not about living up to some kind of ideal of being if you really are functioning in this society in a genuine, direct, sincere, sane, SANE, sane way, people won't even know you're a Buddhist. You'll not be promoting anything. You may be functioning at the grocery store or interacting with someone over here at the library or any number of things. And you also may be very much functioning in that capacity, depending on the way you're interfacing with society as a meditative practitioner or as a student of the Buddha's Dharma. More? Very good, thank you. Okay.
Shogabang, do we need to recognize or understand how we learn in order to learn?
Might be helpful. Could be helpful to see how you're learning. Took me a long time because of just not feeling I was very smart. And of course I'm not, particularly in the conventional sense. Don't have a lot of help in that area from my biological appearance. Mostly visual things are happening with me rather than structural, interior, conceptual ideas. They convert into visual things rather than abstractions called concepts or thinking. Go ahead.
Shogabang, I too also learn visually, but I don't feel like I understand that or know how that works in order to learn. So
I can help you right now. You have to really think about this word. Thank you for the question, because here it comes. You ready? Stop producing. Stop producing. And the way you begin to stop producing is, first of all, you can't stop producing. So you already know that. But stop believing what you're producing. Because what you're doing is you're adding on. The thought arises, and then you add on the commentary to it. Well, this is correct. Stop reinforce, stop protecting yourself. And you might have to watch that for quite a longer number of years where you are helpless when it comes to that area. You might have to just slowly be very, very embarrassed about how much you keep trying to be somebody special. Are you listening? Take it to heart. Don't take it here. Take it to heart. Understand this response is meant to help you, not make things worse for you. You might have to really look at that. Thank you for the question. More?
Shogabang, what do I do in the meantime?
Yeah. Sit as much as you can. You have a pretty busy job and you have a son and you're busy with all that. Find time to sit. Find more time to sit. Not sitting enough. Since you brought it up, sit more. I know you know how to sit. You've been sitting for years. Sit a lot. Schedule it. More?
Kelsey Bowing.
Don't see.
My experience of the form of book study is that it sort of beautifully integrates the cognitive mind and awareness to look at the text. And I'm wondering if there's a similar form when it comes to the text of our mind stream. I find that I either am just observing or I'm overly analyzing.
That's good. That's fine. Just keep watching that. You're young. You haven't been, how long have you been meditating in this way?
A year.
You have a ways to go. When I say you have a ways to go, I'm not saying that you're, you can do this overnight, but I'm saying continue. What happens eventually is the structural part of the mind that we call thinking starts to come apart. And when that comes apart without a practice, the ego gets frightened and drives it back together with opinions, ideas, judgments, and quite often aggression against others who seem to be criticizing us or picking us apart. That's why it's so necessary to have a teacher. So you finally found somebody you can take some feedback from. Because it's not going to be comfortable to have a teacher. If you think this is comfortable relating to this person here, you're too far away from me. And I'm not saying you need to come and sit in my lap either. But I'm saying in order to have the teacher, you have to actually be close enough to receive the teaching. And what's happening in your mind, the way you describe it, is very, very accurate. Seems very accurate. It's just that will come apart as a division. It will not have parts to it anymore. It'll just start to be consciousness only. And the ego mind, the self-centered mind, that is terrifying. Because then everything is let loose. Your mind is completely liberated. It's liberated in such a way that you don't know who you're thinking or what you're thinking. You notice that some thoughts are really intense and are angry, or some thoughts are jealous or possessive. And since there's no longer any reference point for anything, these are allowed to, they're liberated. The Tibetan, or not just the Tibetan, but the Buddhist idea there is sometimes called Rangtong, or self-liberated. It means that they show up but they no longer hook together and form an individual self that has any substantiality or reality to it. But that doesn't mean it isn't frightening or scary or confusing or feeling like we're losing our minds. I have several students that are losing their minds, and they're a very good company. But I lost mine a long time ago. We have nothing to fear. Yeah, nothing really to fear, other than the attachment to the fear or the pushing away at the fear. And even that's not particularly fear producing. It's just don't do anything with it. Just look at it, receive it, be aware of it. Smell it, taste it, touch it, think it, feel it, everything, all those sense fields. Just let them all work. Let them do whatever they need to do. More?
Kelsey Bowing. The moments where it feels like there's no reference point, I have a lot of fear in those. And so I push away and I don't want to sit, and then there's also like this beauty about it. So I feel pulled to sit to try to experience it more. And I'm wondering, I guess, what to do with that.
You're doing it. This is why we have the three jewels. Why we have the teacher. You might not see much of, maybe you probably see enough. And then we have the teaching, which is what this person is endeavoring to present based on not just a reading out of a book, but which we study. We need to do that too. Ancient teachings where someone has understood something and in a particular moment wrote something down, recorded something. And that is so powerful. That insight coming from the insight into the words is so powerful that we continue to study it. And then there's the living teaching, which presumably is being coming out of this person who is talking about what they're looking at, not what they've studied or read or memorized. I don't know anything, but I'm looking at this, and it is not an experience. It's not an experience of I see things so clearly, and you guys are so confused. No, it's the clarity is everyone's. Go ahead.
Kelsey Bowing. Do you feel fear about what you're looking at?
Of course. Fear comes and goes. It doesn't have to stop. Anger doesn't have to stop. Nothing has to happen. And anything that does seem to be happening is an illusion. It's unreal. This is not a conclusion that you have. If you start to conclude this is fuel for ego, It's just something that shows up. But if there can be hundreds of hopes and fears and paranoia and all kinds of things come, but if they can't find a central part of consciousness that is a self, then there's no one to be afraid. It's just the nature of relative truth. It's flying this way and that way, and it's full of feathers and fire and trash and garbage and calamity and exuberance and beauty. You can receive it. Eyes, ears, and all tongue, body, mind, while you're a living being. Receive this incredible world. Be a receiver, not a producer. But if you do produce, make sure that it's coming out of an amazing, astonishing, and unlimited ability to receive everything. Receive it. You can do it. Is it easy? No. And will you have a success story? Will you get a credential? Not from me. I won't give you one. I might punch you. Some of you know that already. Okay.
Sokuzan bowing. Can the conceptual mind be taught by Shikantaza?
It can be taught to stay in its place and be used as a tool or as a device where you can think conceptually about this or that. Some people are extremely gifted in this area, in that conceptual area. Several of them are in this room. Extremely gifted, but that cannot do it. That cannot liberate you. That is like a ball of things all hooked together that work in their own milieu. But beyond that, they don't work. They cannot create a space for a cloud to appear. Only consciousness can do that. Only consciousness is real, and that's suspect because it still has a conceptual reference to it. More.
So, Corinne Bowing, what does an intellect look like when it's being used as a tool of consciousness?
Well, it can be quite passive and not an issue, and have a frequency or vibration to it that doesn't interfere with anything else, that minds its own business, and that is working over here in the light or in the darkness and pushing this, pulling, shoving, shutting down, opening up, closing down. It can do all kinds of various things, and it's could be helpful, could be interesting. It could actually show you how to make cardboard boxes. How valuable is that? Then all you have to do is have something to put in it. I mean, I'm being a little silly, but I'm just saying it's like that structure, but it's just the very structural form of relative truth, which is an illusion. It's unreal. Consciousness is real, but consciousness has no form. If it takes a form and it's consciousness, then it also can move to another form. Did I get close to what you're looking for?
Shoto bowing, how are those who are good at the testing and education system, how are those people being unhelped by it?
Well, they're handicapped by it because they're so taught to believe and reinforce it. But we all know people who are I'm sure we do, people who are extremely intelligent, but really are not very clear. They're pretty crazy about their life and how they're working with their lives and so on. But they have this extreme credential of a PhD or whatever. So they're not being helped because of there's no strong spiritual path in our society, in our culture, in any of the cultures, even the ones with strong traditions. Even in Buddhism, it's just so easy for that to just come apart because of the greed and the macho need to control everyone and everybody. I haven't been there and haven't studied it. My little exposure I got in Japan looked like there's a lot of control. Not that there aren't some wonderful people there, but a lot of the desire to control. More? Yes.
Shokubang, how does thinking or feeling that somebody is special arise as an add-on or an elaboration?
How is it? It's just ego. Thinking you're better than others, you mean? I'm not sure what you want to know about it.
Shokubang, just wanting to understand or see more about what that construction looks like as it arises.
It's just ego, just self-centeredness. Just an imaginary, just paraculpita, imaginary, it's an imagination. There are no separate beings. But as long as you believe this and disbelieve that and buy into the structure of everything that's coming and going, including the past and the future, then you'll participate in that illusion and you'll fight with some things, agree with other things, and ignore other things. Passion, aggression, and ignorance again. The one who has realized nothing happens, even though they're in the midst of a tornado, nothing is happening. Because that which was a center of consciousness has completely come apart. It's blown apart. And you could even say, you could say it in a fancier way, in a maybe more romantic way. It's completely surrendered itself into everything else. It's like Sokuzan's way of describing his experience of heading this direction is everything is appropriate. So that's even after there's an appropriator. There isn't even any, nothing is even appropriate. But that's a good teaching if you're working for trying to stop some things and start other things, to hear someone say that. Everything is appropriate. That means that it has its own place, has its own time, has its own energy, has a right to be here. If it shows up in your mind or your life or in your living room, has a right to be there because it is dependent. It's not a separate object. It is part of this whole matrix, which is quite a good Buddhist movie.
Sokuzan, so what is the mistaken perception or the misunderstanding around how that arises in my own consciousness?
You think you are someone. You think that you're having thoughts.
Sokuzan, is that different than the feeling like you're somebody special?
Similar. Do you feel like you're somebody special? I can go two directions and show your ego. I can just start to criticize you, or I can start to compliment. And I can do that with anyone in here. And if you have any kind of movement in your mind stream that's affected by what I'm saying, that's your ego. And I often do that to people. If you're close students, I will do that to you. I've already died. Its body's still hanging out for some reason. Yes.
Sokuzan. What does it mean to be a fool when that type of narcissism or that self-centeredness is dependently arisen?
When it's different, arisen, what is it? But it means that you don't fight with it. You don't try to stop looking like a fool. You're not concerned about if people think you're a fool, they think you're a fool. Your teacher thinks you're a fool, be a fool. If other people think you're a fool, what? Cave in. Don't do it for the benefit of looking like you're such an agreeable fellow, but just receive what shows up, receive what people are saying and doing. It's not about right and wrong. It's way beyond that. Well,
Sokuzan, how do I work with the fear of relative cause and effect in that?
well, that's why you're a monk, is because you could see that you, at some point, apparently needed to really focus on this path. And so that's what you're doing. But it's getting confusing because now you have a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. Yeah, and then you have a son, and you have expenses. You went out and spent a lot of money on a car, didn't you? What did that cost you? $10,000. I could have sold you one for $5. I mean, you know what I'm saying. I'm being silly a little bit, but I'm just saying, look at your overall situation and try to work with that in such a way that you'll be able to practice and you'll be able to take care of your son along with his mom and work together on that. CCC, communicate, cooperate, collaborate, do it together, support each other. No more war. You don't need war. It doesn't help. your opinions on anything or just that, just opinions based on structures that you think are right and wrong, up and down, back and forth. Sano,
So those of us who work a lot or have a lot of other things going on, is our practice lesser in some way than those who are here?
could you go a little louder? I'm missing some of it.
I said, those of us who work a lot, or
Yes.
those of us who have a lot going on, is our practice somehow lesser than those who are here all day, every day?
No, no difference. I mean, there's a differentiation all over the place, but the differentiation isn't just, you work more than someone else does. It is unending differentiation, and it's the very nature. If you begin to see that, you begin to see this as an illusion, because there's no way you can ever see every single moving part of this. If you were to see everything that was there showing up in a relative way, it'd be pretty difficult for you. Yeah, so you can't. The whole idea of more or less or better or worse or all that, it's just lost in the incredible complication. That's why it's sometimes referred to as a rainbow. Yes, sir.
What does attachment to fear look like?
Well, it's fear is a feeling that there's something threatened. And so that's why it's necessary to, rather than try to push the fear away or shove it away or medicate or even meditate to get it to back off, is to actually look at what is afraid, to actually look at the identity that is threatened. And if you, as long as you think that you are somebody going somewhere, and hope for something better and fear of something worse is going to take hold. Those are the two, sometimes called the two bandits of hope and fear that steal your wisdom mind. Just a relative way of saying it. The wisdom mind can't function as long as there's a hope for something, a grasping passion, or a fear of something, aggression or ignorance is trying to push something away that is threatening. And so it seems to be necessary to see that nothing is threatened. You can't, not that I'm such a wonderful guy, but you can't threaten this, because there's no longer anything here that can be threatened. I mean, you could kill me, but that wouldn't be threatening. Does that mean that, I would not hurt me, you could hit me? And no, I still have nerve endings, so it could probably be terrible. I would probably run away fast. Well, I'd get help. Can't really run very fast, but I'm saying it's not that your nerve endings you somehow no longer have any feelings or emotions, but no, any of the feelings and emotions are understood as pratitya samutpada, dependent origination. That there's no one who feels, there's just intense feelings. There's no one who's paranoid, there's just intense paranoia. You can do this. This can actually be done in this life, but you're going to have to dedicate some time to it. It can't be like maybe it can be casual, but I don't think so. Certainly wasn't casual over here. So just look at when the fear shows up immediately. Who's afraid? You can even say that. Who is it that's who is it that's afraid? Find out the identity. See if you can see that. The more you do sitting practice of meditation, the closer you'll get to be seeing what is actually the personhood there, and see that it is without substance. There isn't anyone there. That's can be even more frightening if there's still some little pieces of me left here and there after the initial explosion. Go ahead.
Earlier, you said something along the lines of there could be an attachment to fear and then also pushing the fear away. And I'm wondering if there's some aspect of the ego that actually wants the fear.
Yes, because if you have fear and it has to do with you being threatened, and that reinforces the reality of a self that can lose or a self that can win. The ego is so incredibly powerful. Even failure works to substantiate, support, or give nutrition to the ego. So it'll even take, just like the two obvious ones that everyone can recognize are praise and blame, or pride and shame. That's a polarity. People can maybe have so much pride that they never will they get even close to shame, they go right back into pride. No, I'm the one who knows. I see it this way, and this is the way it is. I'm not going, that's too risky down there. That can't be the path because it's too scary. The path must be more like this, uplifted light and fluffy and rainbows and puffy things. You know, rather than down here, that's like hell. Why would I go into hell? Well, if you're on this path, this is not a polarized path of heaven and hell. This is a path of heaven and hell are not two separate things. Delusion and awakening are not two separate things. You have to see that. Otherwise, you set up a polarity in your mind. You go to fight, you go to war with your own mind. You go into, you might actually go down and make a home in the shameful area where you never can get everything right. And that's the way you give nutrition to your ego. Especially this can happen if somebody has been abused a lot. You just never can get out of that hell realm. Go ahead. Sir. Final question, go ahead.
What is ego learning in front of you when we're witnessing your receiving, either in Dokusan or in this Dharma talk?
What is ego learning? If with in relationship to me, how to protect itself from me. That's what it's learning. If you're coming this way and you're a student of mine, you're going to find a way to protect yourself from this. And that could be including being really nice and seductive and telling Sokuzan how much you love me and don't have any takers there. No, it's a polarity that doesn't have any right or wrong end to it. So it's the polarity part of it. You follow that a little bit? Can you say something about your experience of that? Or perhaps possibly you could. Sokuzan, can you say something about that? How that worked for you? If you were following what I'm saying.
I don't know that I could articulate anything too clearly about it.
Thank you. Thank you for considering.
For me, it's scary.
Why is it scary?
It feels like losing.
Who's losing?
I don't know. It feels like a me is losing. But
More?
you teach us that there is no self. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Yes. But fear might still come up, but there's no one who's afraid is what I try to say it. That quite often we get caught with trying to stop the fear, trying to get away from the fear and try to cover up the fear, try to blame something for our fear, for our jealousy, for our anger, for. When actually it's the protection of a self that is unreal. There is no self, there's only consciousness. Go ahead.
When you're allowing just a comment in my, yesterday I presented the Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, and through all the reading that I did to get to that, get information, a couple of things really stood out that I didn't say yesterday, but one was his teaching as a young man at Heiji. They say for the first 5 years, practice not saying no. For the first 5 years, don't say no. And secondly is that through saying yes, there's great freedom.
Oh, no, like that. I had not heard that before. So my way of saying something maybe similar, not as simple and profound as that would be, but just include anything that shows up in your mind. Don't fight with it. Don't accept it. Accepting covers it up. Just include the vague, disturbing, irritating, emotional crap that comes up in the mind daily. Excuse me. It's just life occurring to you. Young, take one more.
I think Jeff had a question before me. Okay, so I apologize if I say something before my question. I feel like I did not mean to update you about education. I'm not qualified. I'm just one of the many thousands of educators who also have the intention to bring the social emotional learning and the mindfulness to school besides what's going on already. But there are so many resources and also different ways to work with children with different needs, especially at the private school, not only for children, but also for money too. The private schools make a lot of money for that. But I think as a school teacher, only part-time, and as a mom, I feel like sometimes I'm very stressed when I see I'm not doing enough, or I'm not have enough training to keep up what's going on now, because there's so many ways of bullying at the school, no matter public or private. I feel like sometimes I use a conclusion, just one sentence. I do what I can. I'm just one of the human beings, just do what I can. I feel like that's shut me down, protect myself at the same time. Just do what I can, even though it has a good intention. So how can I look at this ongoing struggle to work as a as a teacher and also as a mom?
Well, it sounds to me, I know you fairly well. It sounds like you're probably already doing everything you can. It's hard to have some kind of a magic wand and just change everything based on even if our understanding is really powerful because of the causes and conditions. It's difficult to go in and just repair it. What you can do, and I would say this to everybody here, you can train your mind so that your own aggression, your own confusion doesn't get dumped out on everybody else out of your frustration for dealing with the craziness of the world. Just train your mind so you see clearly what this is. And that way, what you do will be appropriate and will be basically about receiving things, include the insanity of the world. And it could be in the classroom. And it could also include the kindness and the generosity of the children. I mean, even the ones who are spinning in circles and throwing out sparks. I mean, there's still a lot of generosity happening there with young people. So very important to include them and not particularly go, well, they need to be controlled or trained or something like that. So I think you're probably doing fine. Not that you need my approval, but I would just say continue, sit as much as you can. I say this to everyone. Take the whole apparatus that is living, this being that's going here, going there, going to the store, discussing things with neighbors, discussing things with your partner, your mate, if you have one, on and on, or with your teacher, with your community, and take that and turn it all off temporarily. Sit down, hold still, unplug the damn thing, and hold still and watch what continues to show up in the mind without accepting, without rejecting, and without shutting down or closing off. And the process of doing that will probably involve many, many years of watching how you cannot stop doing that. You cannot stop adding or subtracting or dividing. That is awareness practice. That is how this is done, is my understanding of it, having done it for quite a long time. And it is not a success story. It's if anything, relatively spoken, it's just an uncovering story. We just stop covering up everything. Suddenly, we're just open to everything, just completely vulnerable to everything. Nothing can harm you. Wulong. I'll stop pretty quick.
Wulong bowing. Sokuzan, how do you, when working with survivors of intense physical and emotional abuse,
yes,
where often their bodies respond before they even know what's happening, and they go into protection, how might we offer some space for myself as well in practicing stop protecting yourself? Bowing.
So you and I have known each other for a long time. So how have we worked together in this? How do I work with you and the difficulty you've had as you're functioning as your teacher? You can just look at how this has worked over the years, and how I work with you is totally different than I work with anybody else. And we've met countless times about different dynamics that are happening with you that are very well characterized in your question right there. It's just that, and there's so many people that are suffering, and it's hard to go in and just repair somebody. About the only thing we can do that I really feel strongly about it is to Train your own mind so your clarity is so powerful, and that will not be comfortable. Clarity about confusion, it does not feel good. If you're looking for some kind of uplifted feeling, then you probably are not going to find it in samsara. It's difficult here, very difficult, and people are suffering. So in order to deal with other suffering, we have to stop fighting with our own suffering and actually have a willingness to experience the first noble truth of the Buddha. Life is suffering. Feel good. You can do this. You can receive this suffering. Just let it come and go and come and go. And you'll notice that over time, if you don't interfere with it, if you don't justify it, and if you don't shut it out, that it won't be able to find a central identity anymore. It'll just come and go. It'll be just like you're a building with no doors and no windows. The wind just blows through. The wind of karma comes. Your karma no longer stops and demands you have another lifetime experiencing the same crap again. Why? Because you're not concerned about how you feel. I'm not saying you don't feel intense emotions, but there's no personhood there anymore that is trying to stop it or accept it or get rid of it. You actually enjoy your life. Go eat a banana. Enjoy your taste buds, but don't overeat. I apologize for my silliness. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho Samji Shifu Shizon Busa Moko Sa Moko Hoja Horomi. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Thank you, Sokuzan.
You're welcome, Sophie.